If you were raised by a narcissistic parent, there's a good chance your childhood looked normal from the outside. Maybe even good. Maybe your house looked stable. Maybe your family looked respectable. Maybe other people thought your parent was strong, impressive, devoted, or just doing their best. But inside that environment, something never felt fully safe. Something always felt slightly off, even if you didn't yet have the words for it. In public, they may have seemed charming, confident, generous, or deeply caring. People may have admired them. They may have known exactly how to look loving when others were watching. But behind closed doors, the emotional atmosphere changed. Suddenly, the warmth could disappear. The room could feel tense. Their approval could become unpredictable. And you learned very early that there were two versions of reality, the one everyone else saw, and the one you lived inside. So you adapted. You learned to study their face, their tone, their timing, their mood. You learned to notice tiny shifts before they became explosions, withdrawal, guilt, or rejection. You learned that love could disappear without warning, so your body stayed alert. Even as a child, you were already reading emotional weather patterns, trying to stay one step ahead of the storm. And for many people, that never fully ends. Years later, you may still be living as if their voice is inside your head, still explaining yourself too much, still feeling guilty for having needs, still panicking when someone sounds disappointed, still shrinking, overperforming, or second-guessing yourself before anyone else even says a word. Because the parent may be gone from the room, but the conditioning is still living in your nervous system. A narcissistic parent usually does not experience you as a separate person with your own emotional world. They experience you as an extension of themselves, something that should reflect them well, support them, obey them, admire them, and never challenge their version of reality. Your job was not simply to be a child. Your job was to fit the emotional role they needed from you. That meant regulating them, protecting their ego, staying useful, staying impressive, staying quiet when necessary. And that creates a very specific kind of wound. Because when love depends on how well you manage another person's self-image, you stop asking who you are. You start asking who you need to be in order to stay connected, stay safe, and avoid emotional punishment. So when you had needs, boundaries, anger, opinions, pain, or independence, you may have been punished for it. Maybe through criticism, maybe through guilt, maybe through silence, mockery, comparison, or cold withdrawal. The message was often the same. Your individuality was acceptable only when it didn't inconvenience them. And over time, that teaches a child that being real is dangerous. A healthy parent helps a child build a stable sense of self. They communicate again and again. Your feelings make sense. You are allowed to be different from me. Conflict does not mean abandonment. You are still lovable when you struggle. A narcissistic parent often teaches the opposite. Your emotions are too much. Your boundaries are disrespectful. Your pain is inconvenient. Your independence feels like betrayal. So you grow up learning that love is not safe. Love is conditional. Love is unstable. Love must be managed carefully. It must be earned, protected, and constantly monitored. And that lesson doesn't stay in childhood. It follows you into adult life, where connection can feel less like comfort and more like something fragile that could disappear the moment you stop performing correctly. That's why the effects show up everywhere. In friendships, you may become the overgiver. In relationships, you may confuse anxiety with chemistry. At work, you may become hypercompetent but never feel secure. In conflict, even small tension can feel emotionally dangerous. And in solitude, you may not even know who you are when no one needs something from you. That is one of the deepest effects of narcissistic parenting. It doesn't just damage confidence, it disconnects you from your own center. Because when you grow up around narcissism, your reality is often denied again and again. What hurt you was called dramatic. What you remembered was called wrong. What you felt was called selfish, disrespectful, ungrateful, or crazy. The problem was rarely their behavior. It was always your reaction to it. So over time, you stop trusting your own mind. You question your memory. You minimize your pain. You become vulnerable to manipulation because confusion feels familiar. And that's why so many adults raised by narcissistic parents can describe what happened to them and still feel guilty for saying it out loud. Some part of them still believes that telling the truth is betrayal. Some part still feels responsible for protecting the parent's image. But that guilt is not proof that your pain wasn't real. It's proof of how deeply you were trained to silence yourself. Some children survive by becoming the golden child, the one who is praised for being exceptional, obedient, successful, impressive. But that praise comes with a cost. Your worth becomes tied to performance. You are loved for what you provide, not for who you are. So later in life, you may feel intense pressure to succeed, achieve, and stay admirable at all times, because being ordinary feels unsafe. Some become the scapegoat, the one blamed more easily, criticized more harshly, treated like the source of tension in the family. If that was your role, you may have grown up carrying shame that was never yours. You may still expect blame, even when you did nothing wrong. You may enter rooms already bracing for accusation, because your body learned that being seen often meant being targeted. And some become the invisible child, the one who learned to disappear, to ask for less, to take up less space, to survive by staying quiet, low maintenance, and emotionally hidden. If this was your role, adulthood may feel like a constant struggle to believe that your needs matter. You may be deeply independent on the outside, while privately feeling like your existence is an inconvenience. No matter the role, many children of narcissistic mothers or fathers develop hypervigilance. They scan faces, tone, timing, and emotional shifts before they even realize they're doing it. They become experts at reading rooms before they know how to read themselves. And later, in adult relationships, that can feel exhausting. Because your body is not responding only to the present moment, it's responding to old emotional danger that once trained you to stay on guard. And this creates one of the most painful patterns of all. Familiar chaos can feel safer than unfamiliar peace. Not because chaos is enjoyable, but because it is recognizable. The nervous system often reaches for what it knows before it reaches for what is healthy. So inconsistency, self-absorption, emotional distance, or unpredictability can feel strangely familiar, even when they hurt you. Sometimes healing begins when you realize that what felt normal was never actually safe. There is also grief. Not just grief for what happened, but grief for what never happened. The comfort you didn't receive, the emotional protection you didn't have, the apology that may never come, the parent you kept hoping existed underneath all the harm. This grief is complex because love, anger, sadness, fear, and compassion can all exist at the same time. But grieving what you didn't get is part of telling yourself the truth. Healing from narcissistic parenting is not about becoming cold, emotionless, or perfectly detached. It is about rebuilding your relationship with your own mind, body, and truth. It is learning that your feelings are real even when they were dismissed, that your boundaries are valid even when they trigger guilt, that saying no is not cruelty, that protecting your peace is not selfish, that love does not require self-erasure. So if you still feel it today, if you still hear their criticism in your head, if you still collapse into guilt, if you still feel responsible for everyone else's emotions, that does not mean you failed to move on. It means your mind adapted to survive something deeply destabilizing. But survival is not identity. What happened to you was real. What you feel is real. And healing does not begin when they finally validate it. It begins when you do.